What's up, everybody? Andor returned with the first 3 episodes of Season 2 last night, and well, let's just dive in. Episode 1 gets us started a year after the Season 1 finale, and we're going to be doing that year time jump after every week here in Season 2. These 3 episodes were for BBY, which is before A New Hope, and we'll go down until we get to Rogue One and A New Hope with the finale. Anyway, we're at an Imperial factory on CNR, and Star Wars Rebels fans should recognize that name because they had a CNR factory on Lothal in Rebels. It's where Thrawn was building his TIE Defenders in the show, and I think we're seeing a different model, a test model of the TIE Interceptor, as this is 2 years before Thrawn does that in Rebels. But ILM also did incredible work on this entire sequence in the hangar before we travel to Mina Rao, an original planet for the show, to check in with our group who escaped Ferrix. Bix, she's still having nightmares of Dr. Ghost, and this mirrors a scene from episode 3 that has been, let's say, controversial. From there, we head to Chandra-La as Mon Mothma and her family return home for her daughter's wedding. Luthen, he shows up and it's got Mon sweating bullets over the Y, but he's sweating just as much because they haven't heard from Cassian, even though they got the all clear from their mole on CNR. Then we get the return of director Krennic as he's assembled an inner circle on the Malthian Divide, and despite being considered, an inner circle, this group still doesn't get to know what they're actually working on. That's how far Imperial propaganda spreads under Palpatine, as he hides the Death Star plans in an unlimited energy plan, and great callback to Revenge of the Sith. But this side of the episode also teases a major sequence coming down the road in Season 2, and that's the Gorman Massacre, which is the last card for Mon Mothma with the Imperial Senate. We get the twisted reasoning Krennic has created already for doing this, that being that they need the Calcite for the Death Star reactor core, and so they gotta get it at any cost, and well, we're gonna see the cost. We also learn that Krennic personally brought Dedra into the inner circle, even knowing about her failures on Ferrix. But it was a smart move for Krennic at the end of the day, as she learned from her failure, and he uses her to get solutions to potential problems. Then back on Chandra-La, Lita is already not a fan of her forced husband-to-be, and all Mon can do is apologize. But Lita doesn't even know what she's apologizing about, and I'm very curious to see if she's gonna find out in Season 2, I guess, in the words of Saw Gerrera, for the greater good. I thought Genevieve O'Reilly and Diego Luna carried this episode. It was a weaker story, but it's not uncommon for me to have the best part of a season premiere be the cast. It was Diego Luna and Stellan Skarsgård with the Season 1 premiere, but ILM did some great work on this episode, like I said earlier, and Brandon Roberts composed an incredible score as we make our slow return to the rebellion. That brings us to episode 2, where we find out why Vel returned to Chandra-La despite seemingly never wanting to go back in Season 1, and it's because her and Cinta are falling apart, which we'll find out in a bit where Cinta was, but Luthen is always meddling in people's lives, and Cinta was always work before pleasure. It's not a great recipe for Vel. The same could be said for, and I hate to add on to what I'm sure is an insane amount of hate for these episodes, but I gotta be honest, just like these random rebels being tied to Cassian's side of this first arc isn't a great recipe. Like, obviously, they're connected to Andor and the rebellion as he says they were supplying them, but I couldn't have cared less about their problems, and those were the core of their scenes. Then over on Chandra-La, Mon Mothma's got Take Homa being a baby back bitch over the deal that he brought her, but her rebellion did ruin his life, and now Luthen's hot on his tail as Tay adds to the anxiety that Cassian's created for Luthen by going radio silent. Clea, she reaches her tipping point with all that too, after monitoring it kind of from Chandra-La, and so she heads back to their base of operations on Coruscant. Finally, as far as episode 2 is concerned, Cassian buys his time until he can escape thanks to being held on a ship that he knew and had stuff stored on. He grabs his blaster and escapes with a quick Jurassic Park scene to cover his escape and, thankfully, bring an end to this little rebel group that plays space rock, paper, scissors. Now, I didn't think this episode was terrible. I think Season 1 had an episode or two that were worse, but it was definitely a drop in quality from the first episode, which was already just good, not great, as it's still the cast doing all the heavy lifting for a story that I simply don't care about. With that being said, we've got one more episode to go from the 4BBY arc, and early in this episode, there's a fun scene on Mina Rao with B2 playing with the kids on the planet. But a fun little detail is the kid running with Andor's droid is carrying a toy version, I guess you'd call it, like a toy version in Star Wars of Chewbacca's bowcaster. The fun only lasts so long though, as Dedra and Serial, who are a couple now, are having his mom over for a dinner party. How fun, right?
How about no, you crazy Dutch bastard?
It's the worst part of the season so far, and I'd rather watch Krennic bathe with a bantha before watching another one of these dinner scenes. But then we get one of the few problems that covering an entire year in 3 episodes creates, and that's missing big moments. When Cassian finally gets through to Clea, it's made crystal clear that he's already found Biggs, Brasso, B2, and Will on Mina Rao, and that felt like, the big moment we were going to get in this first arc of season 2 here, Cassian finding his family, and that would have been a great linchpin for these first 3 episodes, but they just kind of jump in front of it, and then we're going from there. Anyway, we see more of Mon Mothma's guilt over selling her daughter for her rebellion, and as the wedding proceeds, we're brought to yet another reference to the Rakatan Empire from Tony Gilroy. I know he said he wants to move on after Andor, and I don't know that I want Disney touching the Old Republic, but his style could be great for an Old Republic movie, I'm just saying. But if you don't know about the Rakatan Empire, the basics are that they were a sinister people who came from the unknown regions, and more importantly, they used the dark side of the Force, which that led to them conquering worlds with strong Force signatures to enhance their power. They're the builders, the Infinite Empire, and Tony Gilroy, in my opinion, would cook if he ever adapted their story. Back to the show though, taking out Tay is no longer an idea but a plan for Luthen, as he's had enough. Mon plays it cute, acting like she doesn't know what's gonna happen and why it's gonna happen, but he calls Cinta in, and I'm assuming that he came into this weekend with her on standby, maybe even having this plan, because it did kind of give the vibe that Luthen is the one that set up Tay and Dario Skolden, whatever his name is, but those two to come to Mon with this marriage proposal, and it feels like Luthen has just been waiting to cut this loose end. Then over on Mina Rao, Brasso is to go looking for Will, and he gets caught sneaking in the fields as Luthen, and Anders' guy sells him out. At the same time, Bix can't escape this one officer, and then the scene that got leaked a couple weeks before the show happens. Now, I don't think this needed to be in the show, didn't need to be in Star Wars. There's plenty of other ways to show evil, especially with the Empire. But I don't think it was, the end of the world, the end all be all either. It didn't ruin this episode or destroy this episode, and it was far from the worst thing in the premiere. Regardless, the episode ends as Cassian returns home in time to help from the sky in his new tie, but not in time to save Brasso. He's gone, and B2, their droid, is left behind as they needed to escape the Empire after the scene that he caused. But this techno dance music is just blasting as they fly away from Brasso. It just felt wrong all around, from the music to spending no time with Cassian and his family after they were reunited off screen in between seasons. But overall, I did think this was a step in the right direction after episode 2. Brasso being gone is brutal, but my gut feeling is that he's only the beginning of Cassian's losses in season 2, so I guess it's just time for us to get ready for that. And so that's going to do it for my breakdown of the first 3 episodes from Andor season 2. These were far from great, and I went in knowing that, it probably was going to be the weakest of the 4 arcs that we're getting here in season 2, but man, I'd be lying to you guys if I said I wasn't nervous for the next 9 episodes. But let me know what you thought about the premiere down in the comments below. Subscribe so that you don't miss any breakdowns the rest of the season, and make sure you have a great day.